Lagos sky wore the soft blush of morning as the first rays of light spilled through the penthouse windows of Alexander Heights. The world was quiet, except for the low hum of the city waking up below. Inside the master bedroom, peace had found a temporary home. Sarah stirred beneath the silk sheets, one hand resting protectively over the swell of her growing belly. Beside her, Darius sat upright against the headboard, shirtless, a hardcover book forgotten in his lap. His fingers gently traced her arm as he watched her sleep, still in awe of the woman who had brought light into his darkest corners. It had been 6 months since their wedding, 4 since they learned Sarah was pregnant. The house, once echoing with silence, now hummed with laughter, soft jazz, the scent of cinnamon pancakes, and baby name debates. Darius had changed, not into someone new, but into someone free, still private, still powerful, but no longer haunted. He leaned down and kissed her forehead. "Time to wake up, Mrs. Alexander," he whispered. Her eyes fluttered open slowly. "Is it morning already?" she mumbled, voice still husky with sleep. He chuckled. "It is, and the baby seems to agree." Right on cue, the bump beneath the sheet shifted slightly. Sarah smiled, her hand moving to meet his. "She kicked again last night, stronger this time." "Of course she did," Darius replied with pride. "She's an Alexander." Their lips met in a slow kiss, the kind that didn't demand urgency but whispered belonging. And just as they leaned into the kiss, the intercom buzzed. Darius pulled away with a groan. Always at the wrong time. He reached for the remote and tapped the screen. A familiar voice crackled through. "Boss, it's Greg. I'm downstairs." Sarah's head snapped toward the screen, surprised. "Greg, I thought he was still in Mauritius." Darius frowned slightly. "He was." Greg hadn't changed much, still lean with that mischievous spark in his eyes and an unspoken loyalty that ran deeper than blood. But something was off. His smile was too forced, his eyes too restless. Over breakfast, Sarah watched her brother with suspicion as he picked at his croissant and avoided eye contact. "What's wrong, Greg?" Greg finally met her gaze, then turned to Darius. "Can we talk alone? Just for a minute?" Sarah looked between them. "No secrets, remember?" But Darius nodded. "It's okay. Just give us a few, love." As she walked out, her gaze lingered. In the private study, Greg didn't waste time. "I messed up, man," he said, rubbing his face. "How bad?" Darius asked calmly, already bracing for impact. "There's this journalist. She's been digging into our family. Your family. She found something, Darius, about your father." Darius's jaw tightened. "What about him?" Greg hesitated. "There's a tape from decades ago, audio, your father confessing to something really bad. It could ruin everything. And someone's threatening to release it unless what?" Darius's voice was dangerously low now. "Unless you back out of that Lagos port deal. They want you off the table." Darius stood, his entire frame taut. His past was like a shadow that never stayed buried. "Who's behind it?" Greg exhaled. "A woman named Isis Amizi. She just launched a new firm in Lekki. Came out of nowhere. But she's got deep pockets. And apparently deep knowledge." The name sent a strange chill through Darius's chest. He'd heard of her, a bold, brilliant investment shark known for ruthless takeovers and whispered secrets. But this was personal. Later that evening, Darius stood on the rooftop balcony, staring out over the glittering skyline. Sarah joined him quietly, wrapping her arms around his waist. "What's going on, Darius?" she asked. He turned to her, then paused. "What do you know about your father's old job, Sarah?" She blinked. "He worked in insurance for a while. Why?" Darius hesitated. "Did you know he once worked under mine?" Her eyes widened. "No. There's more to this story than we know, and I think Isis is counting on that." Back inside, Sarah pulled out a dusty photo album she hadn't touched since their wedding. Buried beneath pictures of childhood Christmases and birthdays was an envelope. Old, yellowed, labeled in her father's handwriting, confidential for Sarah only. Her hands trembled as she opened it. Inside were copies of pay stubs from Alexander Industries, dated back to when she was 5 years old. "Why would Daddy hide this?" she whispered. And then, a single photo fell out. It was her father, smiling, arms slung around a man in a gray suit, a much younger version of Darius's father. The projector whirred softly in the darkened study, casting muted flickers of light across the walls. Darius sat rigid in the leather armchair, his eyes fixed on the grainy footage Greg had uncovered just hours earlier, tucked away on an old hard drive hidden in a false bottom drawer of his late father's desk. Sarah stood behind him, one hand gripping the back of the chair, the other pressed against her chest like she was trying to hold her heartbeat steady. On the screen, two men laughed. Richard Alexander, younger, his posture relaxed for once, dressed in a crisp white linen shirt. And beside him, Edward Obaseki, Sarah's father, wearing a matching grin, shirt halfway unbuttoned, sun spilling across his chest. The camera panned slightly as if set up by one of them. Then came the sound of waves, champagne glasses clinking. Then a kiss, a long, tender, unhurried kiss. Sarah gasped, her knees buckled. She fell onto the edge of the couch. "Oh my God," she whispered. "My father and—" Darius didn't blink. Couldn't. His jaw clenched so tightly it ached. His heart wasn't racing. It was sinking. More clips followed. Silhouettes holding hands near a fire. A villa on an undisclosed coastline. Quiet conversations about getting away and being safe, laughter, kisses, promises. And then a line that changed everything. "She knows, Richard. Your wife knows. She's not stupid." "She won't leave," Richard replied coldly. "She thinks if she stays long enough, I'll come back to her. But you and I both know I never really left you." The silence afterward felt like a scream in their ears. Sarah's voice was barely audible. "All these years, I thought my mother hated my father because he betrayed her with a woman. And now, and I thought my father was just cruel to my mother," Darius murmured, his voice hollow. "But he hated her because she knew the truth, and she wouldn't give him the freedom to live it." Sarah blinked hard. She stayed and paid the price. They sat for what felt like hours. Eventually, Greg entered the room quietly. "I found more. Photos, letters, vacation bookings under fake names. They had properties in Zanzibar, the Amalfi Coast, even Calabar. All paid for in cash." Darius swallowed. "So this is what ISIS was digging for. She wasn't just trying to ruin me. She wants to unravel my bloodline." Greg nodded. "She got wind of this a while ago. She knows if this gets out, people will tear into it. They'll say if your father was secretly in love with another man, and his wife knew, then your whole life, your marriage, everything, it'll look fake, like you're continuing a lie." Sarah's face hardened. "They'll say you're gay too." "They already do," Darius whispered. "They just didn't have proof. Now they have something juicier, a legacy soaked in secrets." Sarah rose from the couch slowly, walking to the window. She stared out at the city lights. Once symbols of power, now reminders of how fragile everything really was. "Our fathers were in love," she said quietly, "and no one ever knew. No one was allowed to know." Darius stood behind her, and they paid the price in different ways, yours with guilt, mine with bitterness. She turned to him. "But you are not your father, Darius, and I am not my mother." "No," he said, "but we carry them, in our names, in our blood, in the eyes of every person watching us, waiting for cracks." Her hand found his. "Then we give them nothing to break." But they both knew it wasn't that simple. Because Isis Amazi had already sent a message that morning, anonymous, encrypted, but unmistakably hers. "Back out of the Lagos port deal, or the world finds out what your legacy truly looks like." Attached was a single image, Richard and Edward, hand in hand on a beach at sunset, cropped perfectly, framed to break headlines. Later that night, Sarah sat in the nursery, watching the stars through the skylight. She held her father's resignation letter in one hand and one of the printed photos in the other. For the first time, she wasn't angry at him. He had loved deeply, secretly, painfully, and she suddenly understood why he walked away. Not from work, but from Richard. Because maybe he loved too much, and Richard couldn't leave the power behind. Darius stood on the balcony of his private office suite, looking down at the city that had once bowed to his silence. His legacy was no longer quiet. It was loud, messy, human. His phone buzzed. Greg again. She's going to leak it. You have 48 hours. Darius didn't reply. He stared into the dark, then whispered to himself, let them talk. The Alexander Global Boardroom was known for its view, glass walls that framed logos like a living masterpiece. But today, no one was looking out. All eyes were on Darius Alexander. He sat at the head of the table in a crisp black suit, no tie, his cufflinks gleaming like quiet armor. His usual stillness was still present, but there was something else in the air now. Fire. The whispers had already begun circulating in financial circles. An anonymous image, an implication, the reek of scandal. And yet here he was, composed, calculated, and above all, ready. I won't dignify blackmail, Darius began, his voice smooth but laced with steel. And I won't back out of the Lagos port deal because of a rumor about a man who's been dead 15 years. Someone shifted nervously in their seat. A few exchanged glances. But sir, one of the younger directors dared, it's not just a rumor anymore. There are images. If this goes public, people will... What? Darius cut in, gaze piercing. They'll say my father was in love with a man? That he lived a lie while destroying my mother's spirit? His voice deepened. That he was cruel because he couldn't live freely, and we suffered for it? No one spoke. He continued, calmer now. Let them say it. I'm not my father, and I will not inherit his shame. Meanwhile, Sarah wasn't sitting still. She stood in the press room at the Alexander Foundation headquarters, flanked by the new media team she'd handpicked just 2 months ago. The room buzzed with quiet intensity as camera crews adjusted their lenses and reporters whispered into microphones. She wore white, a symbol of peace, strength, and control. Not a victim, not a wife hiding behind her husband, a force. Good morning, she began, her voice ringing through the room. Before you ask, yes. My husband and I are aware of the leaked images circulating online. We know the narrative being spun, and we also know the truth. Cameras clicked. Reporters leaned forward. My father, Edward Obaseki, and my father-in-law, Richard Alexander, shared a bond that went deeper than the world was ever allowed to see. It was a truth buried by fear, pride, and the weight of societal judgment. They loved each other, and it tore them apart. Gasps, pens dropped, mouths hung open. Sarah pressed forward. We do not hide from this. We mourn it. We learn from it. And we stand here not as broken legacies, but as people writing a new one. Back in the boardroom, Darius's phone buzzed. It was a live notification from the press stream. Sarah's speech. He watched it in silence for a moment, watched as the woman he loved took the fire meant to burn them and used it to light a path forward. His lips curled into the faintest smile. He turned back to the board. My wife and I will be issuing a formal statement tonight. It will not be an apology. We are not sorry for our past. He stood. Now, about that Lagos port contract. We move forward. Later that evening, Darius returned home. Sarah was in the kitchen, barefoot in an oversized shirt, stirring a pot of pepper soup like the day hadn't shattered glass ceilings and rewritten history. He walked up behind her and wrapped his arms around her waist. You lit the world on fire today, he murmured into her neck. She smiled, resting her head back against his shoulder. Only because I married the man who handed me the matchstick. They stayed like that for a while, holding on to each other, finding peace in the aftermath. When they sat down to eat, Sarah looked at him seriously. Are you okay? No, he said honestly, But I'm not broken either. He picked up his spoon, then paused. I finally understand why my father was such a monster to my mom. He resented her for knowing his truth, for not letting him hide. Sarah nodded slowly. But she stayed, tried to love him anyway. Darius's jaw tightened, and he punished her for it. He looked at her, eyes glassy. Promise me we'll never become our parents. She reached across the table, taking his hand. We won't, because we're not hiding, and because we love each other with the lights on. But even as the city applauded their bravery, not everyone was celebrating. Across town in a luxury suite overlooking the lagoon, Isis Amazi watched the press conference replay with narrowed eyes. Her perfectly manicured fingers tapped against the stem of her wineglass. She flipped the narrative, her assistant muttered. Isis didn't respond. She simply leaned forward and smirked. Let her have her moment, she said. But a woman like that, she always has a weak spot. She tapped the tablet beside her, opening a new folder labeled Sarah Obaseki Medical History Personal. The Alexander Global Boardroom, with its sweeping view of Lagos, was quiet, but charged. Outside, the city hummed with power. Inside, the air was thick with tension. Darius Alexander sat at the head of the long obsidian table, flanked by the senior board. Their eyes were tense, cautious, waiting. The press storm had begun hours ago. Cryptic images, anonymous emails, a wave of speculation. Not about profits or politics this time, but about his past, his bloodline, his wife. And behind it all was a name he had hoped never to hear again, Isis Amazi. Sarah watched from the glass-walled observatory above the boardroom, arms folded across her chest. She could feel the eyes of the world narrowing, waiting for cracks to show in their polished empire. But they wouldn't break, not on her watch. Not when she knew the truth behind Isis's crusade. Darius leaned forward, voice cold and precise. You've all seen the media spin, the legacy drama, the personal attacks. I want to make this clear. My company is not a stage for a woman's unresolved heartbreak. The room fell silent. Some board members blinked, others stiffened, but no one challenged him. Darius continued, This isn't about business. This is about Isis and what she thinks I took from her. He remembered it clearly now. The long summers in Banana Island, the glass mansions, the tennis lessons, the garden parties. Isis Amazi, daughter of a wealthy oil tycoon, bold even as a child. They had grown up side by side, two golden children in a golden cage. They understood each other in ways no one else could. Same pain, same pressure, same masks. He was always quiet, calculated. She was loud, fearless, demanding. They balanced each other. Until they didn't. They both left for university. Darius built his empire, emotionally shut off, married to ambition. Isis chased wild business dreams, changing countries like shoes. But through it all, she never stopped reaching back to him. He remembered the phone calls, the surprise visits, the kiss she planted on his lips one New Year's Eve in Monaco, desperate to awaken something in him. He didn't flinch, just smiled gently and pulled away. I love you, she had whispered. I don't, he had replied softly. Not that way. And after that, the rumors roared louder. He must be gay. He'll never marry. He's untouchable. Isis had cried, then laughed it off. But he knew it broke something in her. And then, Sarah happened. The quiet girl with fire in her eyes, the woman he didn't see coming. The one who made him feel like life wasn't something to endure. It was something to live. When the engagement announcement went out, Isis didn't text, didn't call. But he knew. He knew her silence was louder than any threat. Back in the boardroom, Darius stood. She's not trying to destroy the company. She's trying to destroy me because she thought she was supposed to be the one beside me. Because she believed Sarah stole something that belonged to her. The board exchanged shocked glances. Is that why she's leaking these images? One finally asked. Because of jealousy? Darius's voice was a blade. She doesn't want headlines. She wants revenge. Downstairs, Sarah stepped into her media command center, the press room she transformed into a war room. She tapped the microphone. "This is Sarah Alexander. I'm speaking on record." The cameras focused. The city held its breath. "I know who Isis Amizi is, and I know what she wants. She's not trying to expose the truth. She's trying to rewrite it." She paused, eyes blazing. "She believes I took her life. But the truth is, Darius and I built our life. With love, with pain, with truth. And no one, not even a woman from his past, can dismantle what we've created." At the same time, Isis stood alone in her glass office, watching Sarah's words stream live. Her jaw clenched. She turned to her assistant. "Shut it off." "But ma'am, I said shut it off." The screen went black. She walked to her private bar, poured herself a shot of whiskey, and stared out at the lagoon where she and Darius once played as children. "It was supposed to be me," she whispered. "I was supposed to be Sarah." She hurled the glass against the wall. That night, Darius sat on the floor of the nursery, rubbing Sarah's feet while she read baby name options aloud. "Do you think people will believe her?" Sarah asked quietly. "That I loved her once," Darius said. "Maybe, but it won't matter." "Because?" He looked up at her, eyes steady. "Because I didn't build this life with Isis. I built it with you. And the world always believes the one who keeps showing up." "You've never stopped showing up." She smiled, tears brimming. "Neither have you." But far across the city, Isis Amizi wasn't done. She opened a hidden drawer in her mahogany desk and pulled out a manila envelope. Inside, something she had never planned to use. Something that would turn the world upside down. A legal contract, signed by Richard Alexander, co-signed by Edward Obaseki, titled Inheritance Clause for Child to be Named Heir. Her voice was barely a whisper as she read it aloud. Let's see how Sarah feels when she finds out. The man she married wasn't even supposed to be the heir. The house was unusually still. Not quiet still. The kind of silence that carried a weight, as if the walls themselves were holding their breath. Darius stood in the bedroom that once belonged to his mother, the late Mrs. Amaka Alexander. He hadn't stepped foot in this room in over 3 years, not since her funeral. He hadn't been ready. He wasn't sure he ever would be. But Isis's latest attack had forced him to dig deeper. First the inheritance clause, then the whispers about heirs. Something inside him needed to know, was anything in his life real? He opened the drawers slowly, methodically, searching for answers he couldn't quite define. Then he found it. A locked jewelry box tucked beneath neatly folded wrappers of vintage scarves and old perfume bottles. He almost missed it. The brass edges had dulled with time. The key was still taped to the underside. He opened it. Inside was a single white envelope. "To Darius, when you're ready." His heartbeat thudded in his ears as he opened the letter. His mother's familiar, looping handwriting filled the page. "My dearest son, if you are reading this, then I am no longer beside you, but know that I have never left your heart. You were not born from my womb. You were born from my prayers. After years of trying, of crying, of loss, I was told I could never have children. Your father didn't want to adopt, but I refused to give up on the idea of holding a child in my arms. A friend connected me to a young woman, and the moment I saw you, I knew you were mine. You cried so loudly, like you were already fighting for space in this world. I never told you because I wanted you to grow without feeling less than. You were my son, Darius. You were everything. You still are." Darius froze. Adopted? His mother wasn't his mother? The letter trembled in his hands as he sank into the vanity chair. The weight of the truth hit him like a tidal wave. It made sense now. The occasional coldness from his father, the emotional distance, the unspoken friction. He'd never felt truly connected to Richard Alexander, not in the way sons and fathers should be. But his mother, she had loved him like air, fiercely, softly, completely. She chose him. And suddenly he realized he was mourning her all over again. Hours later, Sarah found him in that same spot, slumped, the letter still in his hands. His eyes were red, not from tears, but from holding them back. She didn't speak. She just walked up to him and gently knelt before him. "She's not your mother?" she asked quietly. He shook his head. "Not biologically, but she raised me. She protected me. She prayed me into existence." Sarah nodded, eyes brimming. "That makes her your mother, in every way that matters. But everything I thought I was," his voice cracked. "The name, the legacy, the bloodline, it's all a lie." Sarah reached for his hand and placed it on her belly. "This is your legacy," she whispered. "Not contracts, not genes. Us, our baby, our truth, our future." That night, Darius stood by the window in their bedroom, the city shimmering far below. Sarah was asleep on the bed behind him, curled around her pregnancy pillow, her face peaceful despite the chaos outside these walls. His thoughts swirled like a storm. Adopted, not a true Alexander, not part of the legacy. But then, what was a legacy, if not love built over time? His mother had known, and still loved him without limit. His wife now loved him through every bruise of truth he uncovered. He turned from the window and walked over to Sarah. He slid into bed, wrapped an arm around her, and pressed a soft kiss to her cheek. "I may not know where I came from," he whispered, "but I know where I'm going. And it's here, with you, with this baby, with this love." Sarah stirred, half asleep. "You okay?" He nodded against her skin. "I just realized something." You're my clan, my real family. You and this little one, you're all that matters now." But while Darius was healing quietly, Isis was stirring more chaos. She now knew he was adopted, and if the public found out, it would detonate the very foundation of his reputation. The media would no longer ask if he was the rightful heir. They'd ask if he even belonged at all. And Isis? She was already preparing the next leak. A DNA report, a copy of the adoption documents, a whisper campaign so brutal it would make board members resign in fear. She stared at her screen, her eyes burning with envy and vengeance. "He has everything," she hissed, "and he still got the girl, still built the life I was promised." She opened her email and began typing. "To whom it may concern. You'll want to see the attached files before you keep trusting Darius Alexander with your billions." It happened at 7:06 a.m. One mass email, hundreds of inboxes, media houses, boardrooms, international investors, government officials. The subject line read, "The truth about Darius Alexander. Adopted, unworthy, unreal." Attached were adoption documents, photos, DNA test results, a voice memo from a former nurse confirming that Darius Alexander was never biologically connected to the Alexander bloodline. Within minutes, the internet erupted. Hash not an Alexander hash. Empire built in these hash, who was Darius really? And right in the middle of it all, the Lagos business community froze. In the penthouse, Darius stood before the massive screen in his home office, watching the chaos unfold live. Sarah sat on the couch, arms crossed tightly over her chest, one hand still protectively cradling her baby bump. Her phone wouldn't stop ringing. "We should have seen this coming," Darius said, voice eerily calm. "She went for the final blow." Sarah stood, walked over, placed a hand on his chest. "You told your truth. You gave them your heart, and now you give them your strength." He looked down at her. "They're going to say I stole everything. Then we remind them that you built everything." By noon, Isis Amizi was trending worldwide. For a few hours, she was back in the spotlight, flashing across every channel, every blog, every stock group. She booked an exclusive interview, expecting the world to listen. "They lied to you," she told the camera, her tone righteous. "He was never one of them. He doesn't deserve the empire. He doesn't deserve the admiration. He's adopted." But something strange happened. No one clapped. No one nodded. The audience stared back, stone-faced. One host even muttered under her breath, "Is that all you've got?" And slowly, public opinion began to shift. Meanwhile, Darius and Sarah walked into the Alexander Foundation's auditorium that evening for a press conference. The room was packed: reporters, shareholders, staff, followers, enemies. Everyone was there. Darius stepped up to the podium with Sarah by his side, her hand looped through his arm, her presence a statement in itself. "I was adopted," he said without flinching, "and I've never been prouder of anything in my life." A hush fell over the crowd. "My mother, Amaka Alexander, gave me a name, a home, and a love deeper than blood. My father may have kept secrets, but I built this empire with sweat, sacrifice, and silence turned into steel. If you believe a name makes a man, then walk away. But if you believe in character, then stay, and watch what we do next." Sarah leaned in, her voice firm but warm. "This family may not be bound by blood, but we are bound by something stronger: truth, loyalty, and legacy. This baby we're expecting won't be born into scandal. They'll be born into honor." The applause was hesitant at first, then it swelled. Loud, roaring, people stood. Not for wealth, not for scandal, but for courage. Darius Alexander didn't just reclaim his name. He redefined it. In the days that followed, something unexpected happened. ISIS lost her leverage. Her team quit. Her investors pulled out. No one returned her calls. Media houses withdrew their features. She tried to publish another expose, but no one cared. The world had moved on. From her bitterness, from her vendetta, from her noise. And Darius, he secured the Lagos port deal with full board backing and a unanimous vote of confidence. International partners who had hesitated before now called him, personally offering congratulations. In their bedroom one evening, Sarah walked out in a soft robe, rubbing her belly and smiling. "Guess who's trending again?" Darius smirked. "Us?" She nodded. #legacy of love. They're calling our press conference one of the most powerful moments in corporate history. He chuckled, pulling her close. "We didn't plan to become a revolution." "No," she said, kissing his cheek. "We just planned to be honest." The baby's room was finally ready, painted in soft green with golden accents. Peaceful, safe, whole. Darius stood in the doorway one night, arms folded as he watched Sarah adjust a blanket in the crib. "I used to think legacy was something you inherited," he said quietly. She turned, resting her head against his chest. "And now?" He looked around the room, at her, at the life growing inside her. "Now I know. It's something you build, one truth at a time." Across town, in a darkened office stripped of its staff and pride, Isis Amazi sat alone. Her phone rang again, but she didn't answer. She scrolled through headlines that once belonged to her. Now all they read were 3 words: Darius, Sarah, forever. The hospital room smelled of lavender, antiseptic, and the raw magic of new life. Darius Alexander had never known silence like this. Soft, sacred, wrapped in the sound of steady beeping monitors and the faint cries of newborns echoing down pristine white corridors. But in this room, time had stopped. He stood frozen at the foot of the hospital bed, his eyes wide with wonder and disbelief. In his arms, wrapped in a soft cotton blanket, lay his newborn daughter, eyes closed, tiny fists curled, her skin warm against his chest. "She's here," he whispered. "She's really here." Sarah, propped up in bed with her hair slightly damp and her lips dry from hours of labor, managed a tired but glowing smile. "She's perfect, isn't she?" Darius swallowed hard, a tear sliding down his cheek. "She's everything." The labor had come faster than expected. Sarah's water broke at 2:11 a.m. while they were watching a documentary on vintage architecture, something mindless to distract them from the whirlwind of recent weeks. He had driven like a madman, but kept her laughing through contractions. "Don't let this baby be born in the Bentley," she'd warned. Now it was all behind them. Now she was here. The nurse came in with a soft smile. "Have we decided on a name yet?" Darius looked at Sarah, who nodded with tears in her eyes. He looked down at the baby and said, steady and proud, Amaka Eden Alexander. Named after his mother, the woman who had loved him like he was made of light, and Eden for the peace they finally found. The nurse smiled warmly. It suits her beautifully. The news of the baby's birth spread like wildfire. Darius and Sarah welcome baby girl. A legacy reborn. Meet Amaka Eden. The couple who redefined power now welcome their future. And for once the headlines were soft, warm, joyful. There were no scandals, no whispers, no doubt, only celebration. Darius sat by the window that evening, his daughter in his arms, watching the sun bleed into the Lagos skyline in strokes of gold and tangerine. I almost gave up on myself, he whispered to her. There were nights I didn't know who I was, days I doubted I was enough, weeks I believed every lie they threw at me. He paused, brushing a fingertip over her tiny cheek. But then I met your mother, and she showed me that love isn't about bloodlines or business. It's about truth, about showing up, even when you're scared. Sarah, watching from the bed, felt her heart swell. She knew he wasn't just speaking to the baby. He was finally speaking to himself. They went home 3 days later, greeted by flowers, family, and a staff that cried when they saw the baby. The nursery glowed with soft nightlight stars on the ceiling. Darius placed Amaka gently in her crib, then stood silently for a moment, taking it all in. This was what he fought for. Not just a company, not just a name, but a future. Later that night, Sarah found him on the balcony, shirtless in the warm air, staring out over the city he once ruled with fear and silence. Now he ruled with truth. She walked over and wrapped her arms around him from behind. How does it feel? She asked. To hold her, he said. To finally feel free. He turned and kissed her forehead. Like I didn't just win, like I finally arrived. They stayed like that, quiet, whole, unshakable. Because in the end, Darius Alexander didn't need a legacy to define him. He built one of his own, with love, with pain, with truth. And it all began with the baby who reminded him that he was always enough. The morning light spilled softly into the Alexander penthouse, dancing across the floor like silk. The home had never felt more alive. A lullaby played gently in the nursery while baby Amaka slept, her little chest rising and falling like the calm after a long storm. Sarah was in the kitchen sipping mint tea, still in her satin robe, scrolling through messages of congratulations. Darius stood barefoot in the hallway, holding a leather-bound journal that had just been hand-delivered in a wooden box from an archive in Abuja. The return address? Edward Obaseki Estate. He turned the cover gently. A note was tucked inside. For my daughter, if truth ever becomes more valuable than silence. He stared at it for a long moment, then walked to the kitchen and handed it to Sarah. I think your father left you one last key. They sat together on the couch, the baby monitor between them, and began to read. Page after page, Edward detailed his life, working under Richard Alexander, falling in love, the guilt of the affair, and the deep pain of loving someone who couldn't love him openly. But then came an entry that made Sarah sit up straighter. I feared Richard's anger more than I feared the world's judgment. I kept documents, evidence, even names. Isis was just a child then, but her father knew too much, too close to Richard. We were all entangled, and the fallout would have ruined all of us. One day, Richard confessed something I never told anyone. He had doubts about Darius's adoption, said he never approved it, claimed Amaka went through with it on her own, that he suspected the child wasn't legally adopted through proper means, that Darius might be the son of someone else, maybe even from inside our circle. He said, if the boy ever finds out, it'll break him. Sarah stared at the page, her heart thudding. What does this mean? She whispered. That maybe even your adoption wasn't legal? Or worse, Darius's jaw tightened. Or that I might be the biological child of someone in their circle, someone they never told me about. The room fell into a heavy silence. "Do you want to find out?" Sarah asked gently. Darius looked at her, then glanced at the baby monitor. "No," he said firmly. "Not now. Maybe not ever." She searched his eyes. "Why?" "Because I finally know who I am. I'm not some signature on a document. I'm a father, a husband. I built something. I survived hell and came out whole." He reached for her hand. "You and this baby. You are my beginning. Whoever I was before doesn't matter anymore." But someone else was still watching. Isis sat in the shadows of her now nearly empty Lekki office, watching the latest blog entry go viral. From bastard to billionaire, Darius Alexander shrugs off scandal with baby girl and beautiful wife. No one cared about her whispers anymore. No one believed her warnings. But deep down she knew that journal changed the game. She may have lost the battle, but she wasn't done reading the war map. And she would be watching. Later that night, Darius sat in the nursery again, humming softly to Amaka as she slept in his arms. Sarah walked in and leaned against the doorway, just watching him. "You're a good father," she whispered. He looked up, eyes gentle. "I wasn't sure I'd ever be one." "You were always one," she replied. "You just had to find your way home." He stood, placed Amaka in the crib, then wrapped his arms around Sarah from behind. "If the world turns on us again," he said softly, "promise me one thing." "What?" "Don't let me shut down. Don't let me walk alone." She turned and looked into his eyes, fierce with love. "Never," she said. "If the world turns, we turn together." And outside their window, the city kept moving, buzzing, talking. But inside these walls, peace had finally unpacked its bags. Dear viewers, what lesson did you take away from this dramatic tale? We would love to hear your thoughts in the comments below.